And good evening, and thank you for the reading of Daniel chapter 2. So this evening we're going to focus on Bible prophecy. And Bible prophecy is one way that we can know that God is in control. And it's good to look at prophecy to build our faith, but equally Bible prophecy is a test of faith. We can either trust what God has said, or we can come up with defences to try and find reasons not to believe what's in front of us. We have a fundamental choice whether we rely on our own thinking, which is flawed and limited, or whether we accept the absolute wisdom of God, who has complete understanding of things that we can only grasp at. We will mainly look at 4 empires from history this evening, but I'll show you that the Bible has set out the course of key events in world history. And God sets out the purpose of prophecy in the Bible. Got 2 quotes on the screen. So Isaiah 46, verse 9 and 10. Remember the former things of old, for I am God, and there is none else. I am God, and there is none like me, declaring the end from the beginning, and from ancient times the things that are not yet done, saying, my counsel shall stand, and I will do all my pleasure. So in the Bible, we can see world events foretold. We can therefore be confident of other things the Bible tells us. And Isaiah 55, verse 11, God says, so shall my word be that goeth forth out of my mouth. It shall not return unto me void, but it shall accomplish that which I please, and it shall prosper in the things whereto I sent it. If we understand the Bible, then it has the power to save our lives and give us a hope that we can't have without faith. Now, I'll explain what's on the screen in a moment, but first of all, just say an empire is a territory ruled by a single government that contains several lands and peoples, and it's usually formed by conquest. And empires have played a significant role in shaping the world in which we live today. Think in terms of Britain being occupied by the Roman Empire. We've got roads, aqueducts, reading, better ways of counting, but that was alongside the brutality of Rome for the people alive during the time of the empire. Empires have been responsible for repression and exploitation, but empires have generated wealth through exploitation. They've driven increased trade and sharing of ideas. Empires bring nation states to an end and prompt uprisings, and new nations are formed as empires come to an end. Lots of empires have risen and fallen, and in their day they were the most powerful armies in existence, the richest economies. But they've all fallen, and their arrogance has come to nothing. Man's rule is never fair, and it doesn't compare to God's kingdom and God's ways. God allows humans free choice. People can choose to do evil or do good. And there'll come a time when people accountable to God will answer for their choices. So I've listed the major empires that have existed in world history on the screen. There are other empires that perhaps contain 2 or 3 countries that I've left out of this list, like the Austro-Hungarian Empire, or conquests that only lasted a relatively short period of time, like the invasions by Nazi Germany. And I've left out other groupings of countries like the USSR. So Acadia is accepted by academics as the first great empire. It covered a swathe of the Middle East, and it offered a distinct culture, but it was an empire based on violence and terror. And the first line on the slide shows the empires that started several centuries before the birth of Christ. The second line shows empires that were formed from around the time of Jesus until the early modern period. And the bottom line shows empires that were formed through to the late modern period. Bible prophecy isn't, though, a list of dates and facts for us to check against. Bible prophecy sets out the purpose of God, and God's purpose is focused in on Israel since he chose Abraham and his family to call out from the world around them. So please turn to the book of Deuteronomy. I'm just going at Deuteronomy chapter 7. Deuteronomy chapter 7, verse 6. And this is what God is addressing the people of Israel. For thou art an holy people unto the Lord thy God. The Lord thy God hath chosen thee to be a special people unto himself, above all people that are upon the face of the earth. The Lord did not set his love upon you, nor choose you, because you were more in number than any people, for you were the fewest of all people. But because the Lord loved you, and because he would keep the oath which he had sworn to your fathers, hath the Lord brought you out with a mighty hand and redeemed you out of the house of bondmen, from the hand of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. So God's purpose is worked out through the nations and the choices that leaders make from the options they have. Let's read to you Daniel 4 and verse 17. The living may know that the Most High ruleth in the kingdom of men, and giveth it to whomsoever he will, and setteth up over it the basest of men. And God is shaping world events to work out his purpose. And his purpose is set out in, among other places, Habakkuk 2, verse 4, which I'll just read to you. But the earth shall be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. And God will deliver his purpose by sending Jesus back to the earth to set up a kingdom that will bring people to God. And that kingdom will last for 1,000 years, as we're told 6 times in the book of Revelation. So Bible prophecy focuses in on the significant milestones that take us from Bible times to the return of Jesus. It doesn't aim to tell us about countries or empires that will only have a small part to play in moving God's purpose forwards. So let me show you which empires are referred to in the Bible. And first, there are the empires that existed in the time that the Bible was written. And I'll show these empires in red. There are also empires that are subject to prophecies in the Bible, but which weren't empires in Bible times. And I've shown these empires in green. And there were 3 empires that were present in Bible times, which were also subject to future prophecies, which are shown in red and green. We'll mainly focus on these empires for the rest of our talk. And the final category of empires that aren't referred to in Bible prophecies or in Bible history are in grey. These empires, like the Aztecs or the King dynasty, never controlled the people of Israel in the land of Israel. And these empires have not had a significant bearing on the history of God's people. So I suggest it's unsurprising that these empires aren't mentioned in the Bible. So let's turn to Daniel chapter 2 and think about what Nebuchadnezzar's dream tells us. Gold is Babylon. We're told that in Daniel chapter 2 and verse 37. We're not told who the other kingdoms are, but we're told 2 things about all of them. Each empire is in some way inferior to the empires that come before them. And secondly, each empire follows on from the previous empire. It's in order. We're also given some more information in Daniel 7, which is another vision about the empires that would control the land of Israel until the people of Israel were thrown out of the land. Now, each metal in the statue in Nebuchadnezzar's dream is less valuable as you go down the statue, in the same way that each system of government under the following kingdoms would not be as strong as Babylon's absolute monarch. Also, each metal is harder as you go from the top to the bottom of the statue. And I suggest this shows that each empire that followed the previous one was militarily stronger than the one that preceded it. So let's just start with me just saying that the silver is Medo-Persia, the brass is Greece, and the iron is Rome. And the iron and clay are the mix of weak and strong nations that have followed the Roman era. Now, there were two parts of the Medo-Persian Empire, just as there were two silver arms. And the Medo-Persian Empire wasn't an absolute monarchy like Babylon, but was divided into regional and national government, and kings were constrained by decrees that they made that they couldn't be changed by anyone. Brass was widely used in Greece for statues and soldiers' helmets. The Greek government was based on Alexander's leadership. He kept the Persian system of national and regional government, and he put people from different provinces ruling families in control of regional government, which proved difficult to manage. Iron represents the Roman Empire. Just as there are two legs on the image, the Roman Empire divided in two in AD 395. And there was a Western Roman Empire, which lasted until around 476 AD. And there was an Eastern Roman Empire that became known as the Byzantine Kingdom that lasted until 1453 AD, in the fall of Constantinople. Rome used iron to protect its soldiers with helmets and body armor, and for their weapons. The Roman government was weaker than the Greek government, as it started with a republic of elected leaders, and even when the republic was replaced by a Caesar, the Caesar reported to the Senate. And then the iron mixed with weak clay, the strong and the weak nations, since the end of the Roman Empire. No other empire has controlled Israel and the people of Israel since the end of the Roman Empire. The stone cut from the mountain without human hands represents Jesus returning to the earth to establish a kingdom that replaces the kingdoms of mankind. The thought I want you to hold on to for now is that Babylon was followed by Medo-Persia, was followed by Greece, was followed by Rome. All four of these empires controlled the land and the people of Israel until Rome expelled the Jews from Judea in AD 70 and AD 125. So I want to take us to Daniel chapter 7, which is talking about the same empires and the same time periods. Now, Daniel 7 gives us some startling visual metaphors that are aiming to give us some more detail on the four empires in Daniel chapter 2. So please turn to Daniel chapter 7, please, and we'll start at verse 2. Daniel spake and said, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of heaven strove upon the great sea, and four great beasts came up from the sea, diverse one from another. The first was like a lion and had eagle's wings. I beheld till the wings thereof were plucked, and it was lifted up from the earth and made stand upon the feet as a man. A man's heart was given to it. And behold, another beast, a second, like to a bear, and it raised up itself on one side, and it had three ribs in the mouth of it, between the teeth of it. And they said thus unto it, Arise, devour much flesh. After this I beheld, and lo, another, like a leopard, which had upon the back of it four wings of a fowl. The beast also had four heads, and dominion was given to it. After this I saw in the night visions, and beheld a fourth beast, dreadful and terrible, and strong exceedingly, and it had great iron teeth. It devoured and brake in pieces, and stamped the residue with the feet of it. And it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. I beheld till the thrones were cast down, and the Ancient of Days did sit, whose garment was white as snow, and the hair of his head like the pure wool. His throne was like the fiery flame, and his wheels as burning fire. Just go down to Daniel 7, verse 15. I, Daniel, was grieved in my spirit, in the midst of my body, and the visions of my head troubled me. I came near unto one of them that stood by, and asked him the truth of all this. So he told me, and made me know the interpretation of the things. These great beasts, which are four kings, which shall rise out of the earth. The saints of the Most High shall take the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever, even forever and ever. So let's take a step back. We've got 4 different images of creatures, like we had 4 different parts of Nebuchadnezzar's image. And the vision of the beast ends with God's kingdom, just as the stone without hands knocks down the image and fills the whole world. And Babylon used a lion with wings as a symbol of royal power, as shown on the screen. So the symbol would have been readily understood in Daniel's time. God also describes Babylon as a lion or eagle several times, and some example verses are on the screen. The bear that is stronger on one side than another is like Medo-Persia, as over time the Persians became stronger than the Medes. And the 3 ribs in the bear's mouth represent 3 major provinces taken over by Medo-Persia, Babylon, Lydia, and Egypt. The 4-headed, 4-winged leopard represents the speed of Greece in taking over much of the known world in just 3 years. And then following the death of Alexander the Great, the Greek Empire was split into 4 parts, with Alexander's general each ruling one of the 4 parts, and each head of the leopard represents a general. The beast, unlike any other, is Rome. Rome was just a city in the time Daniel lived and wrote. That's between 500 and 600 years before Jesus was born. The Roman Empire didn't exist, and it was the only empire covered by the visions that didn't exist at the time that Daniel lived. The Roman Empire would deploy mercenaries and technology in a way that previous empires could only dream of. Much of this technology was based on iron, and iron forms the teeth of the 4 beasts. The 10 horns on the beast's head represent the division of the Roman Empire into many nations after its fall. So if we put Daniel 2 and Daniel 7 together, we have 4 empires that follow one another that cover the time when the people of Israel were in the land of Israel, that have different characteristics of the empire described in the chapters that fit together perfectly. If Daniel had written this without God inspiring him what to write, he would have been fantastically lucky to guess that there would just be 4 empires overseeing the people of Israel in the land of Israel before most Jews were expelled from the land. And he would have been unbelievably lucky to have got the number of empires right and have described details relating to those empires that confirms their identities. And this isn't luck, this is the inspiration of God, and this is a reason to believe God is the author of the Bible. However, because there are so many amazing prophecies in Daniel and in other books, the obligation this may put on people to take the Bible seriously has led to people criticizing the Bible and suggesting that Daniel was written to the events it describes. There have been Bible critics from around 1890 who've argued that Daniel was written about 400 years after the Bible says Daniel was written. They argued that Babylon was not a particularly great city, that the kings of Babylon listed in the Bible were incorrect, and above all, that the prophecies given in Daniel reflected detailed events and therefore could not have been written down beforehand. They argued that the book of Daniel had been written around the time of the Maccabees. That's a group of Jews who lived 165 BC to 37 BC. And this view of Daniel is the way the majority of modern scholars still understand the book of Daniel. This is the choice we always have: to think with human experience and perceptions, or to look at things from God's perspective. Could just leave it there and leave it to faith. But I'd like to tell you the story of how the Bible critics were proved wrong again and again. But that hasn't stopped people today from expressing the same ideas based on the same disproven analysis. The first book that was published arguing that Daniel was a later work came out in 1890. In 1899, 9 years later, archaeologists started excavating Babylon in earnest, and they discovered bricks with the names of Babylonian kings on that Bible critics said had been made up. Now, this must have been a little embarrassing for the Bible critics. And then the archaeologists found titles of different levels of rulers in Babylonian bureaucracy, written in clay tablets that were described in accurate detail by Daniel. They found the Nabonidus cylinder, created around 550 BC, with details of the reigns of Babylonian kings described in the Bible, all consistent with what the Bible says. Now, this was probably quite a bad set of facts for the Bible critics with books to sell. But it got worse for their arguments as archaeologists found evidence that the vocabulary used in the Chaldean words used in the book of Daniel reflected the vocabulary used at the time the Bible says Daniel was written. That includes words no longer in use 100 years after the book of Daniel was written. So I think the arguments for Daniel being written in the time of the Maccabees look implausible. However, there are two more killer facts. Killer fact number one is that the book of Daniel is among the Dead Sea Scrolls. And the Dead Sea Scrolls were written in around 200 BC. That's 35 years before the Maccabees arose, and 170 years before the Roman Empire was founded. And those Dead Sea Scrolls were copies made of previous scrolls that had been worn out by use. They were in a community's library that was in regular use until the community decided to hide their precious scrolls. Killer fact two, the book of Daniel was quoted in non-biblical sources, such as the history of Josephus, who recorded that the Jewish high priest showed Alexander the book of Daniel when he came to Jerusalem in around 330 BC. And key fact number three, before the late 19th century, the only known references outside the Bible to King Belshazzar, whose reign is used to date two key prophecies in Daniel, was in the writings of Josephus. Herodotus, known as the father of the study of history, wrote about the history of Babylon, but was unaware of King Belshazzar, and he was writing about 100 years after Daniel. And this fact was used by Bible critics to say that the Bible was incorrect and there was no such king. However, Belshazzar is named on the Nabonidus cylinder, as I said, mainly about 550 BC. And so if Daniel actually lived at the time of the Maccabees, then how did Daniel know that Belshazzar existed if Herodotus, the father of the study of history, didn't know about Belshazzar just 100 years after he died? There's only one argument made by Bible critics that I haven't addressed. They argue that the prophecies in Daniel are so historically accurate that they must have been written after the events they describe. We therefore have the choice. We tell ourselves that Daniel wasn't written about 550 BC on the basis of a demonstrated a poor logic, or we understand the revealed word of God and base our lives on its solid foundations. Now, let's start to bring this talk to a close. And I just want to share three quick snapshots of other empires the Bible told us about. Firstly, the Egyptian Empire, which was a superpower for most of ancient times, and it rivaled Babylon in around 600 BC. And in around 660 BC, the prophet Ezekiel was inspired to write the following in Ezekiel 29, verse 14, that's on the screen. And I will bring again the captivity of Egypt, and they, Egypt, shall be there a base kingdom. It shall be the basest of kingdoms. Neither shall it exalt itself any more above the nations. For I will diminish them, that they shall no more rule over the nations. Just look at Ezekiel 30, verse 13, again on the screen. And there shall be no more a prince of the land of Egypt, nor put fear in the land of Egypt. This was an extraordinary prophecy to give. and one that could have been used to prove the Bible false. The prophecy doesn't say that Egypt will be a weak nation for a few years around the time the prophecy was given. This prophecy says they will no more rule over other nations. There will be no more an Egyptian monarch in charge of Egypt, and that's forever. And that prophecy is true to this day. Since the pharaohs, the Egyptians were ruled by the Persians, the Greeks, the Romans, the Ottomans, the French, and the British. And Egypt currently only has the 33rd largest economy in the world, and it doesn't even have the largest economy in Africa. Think of the wealth of Egypt from the time that Ezekiel was prophesying, and know that this prophecy came from God. The penultimate empire I'll focus on, the Ottoman Empire, which covered most of the Middle East from 1299 until 1922. Now, the book of Revelation is a book of symbols and signs, and it talks about the rise of the Ottoman Empire, among others. And the verse on the screen is talking about the drying up of the Ottoman Empire by using the river Euphrates as an image. The river Euphrates sprang from Turkey and went the breadth of the Ottoman Empire. So Revelation chapter 16 and verse 12. And the sixth angel poured out his vial upon the great river Euphrates, and the water thereof was dried up, that the way of the kings of the east might be prepared. Now, I'm not going to go into this in any detail, but this is telling us the Ottoman Empire would dry up like a river in a drought. And this happened in 1922 when the modern Turkish Republic was formed with national borders that excluded most of the territory that the Ottomans had ruled. And then finally, the last empire that I'll just briefly refer to is the British Empire. And we've heard talks on Ezekiel 38, I'm sure in recent times. I'm not going to go through Ezekiel 38 in any detail. Just remember the prophecy that as Russia and its allies launch an attack on Israel, then another group of allies stands up and offers a weak challenge. And that's Ezekiel 38, verse 13. Sheba and Dedan and the merchants of Tarshish with all the young lions thereof shall say unto thee, art thou come to take a spoil? Hast thou gathered thy company to take a prey, to carry away silver and gold, to take away cattle and goods, to take a great spoil? So, some more information on this, just please search YouTube for the phrase, is Britain the Tarshish of Bible prophecy? That is Britain the Tarshish of Bible prophecy, for detailed explanation of why Christadelphians have said that Britain is Tarshish for over 170 years. In Ezekiel 38, we have the picture of Britain as a former empire, working with modern nations that have been established through its empire, with Britain not being particularly strong, not being a major world power in its own right. And that's Britain today. Now, I'm not saying the final battle of Armageddon will happen tomorrow or even next week. Jesus comes back before the battle of Armageddon. So we can't wait to see Russia prepare for a southern invasion or Britain and their allies standing weakly by before deciding to get baptized. There could be several years between the return of Jesus and the Battle of Armageddon. In Ezekiel, we see Britain separate from the powers of Europe, described in Ezekiel 38, and that's only happened in the last 3 years. Finally, we can put too much emphasis on prophecy. It's important to know that God knows the end from the beginning. And it's interesting to see key developments in human history mapped out in advance. But prophecy isn't an end in itself. Prophecy is the means of seeing that God exists and is in control. And as Hebrews 11 verse 6 says, without faith it is impossible to please God. For he that cometh to God must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of them that diligently seek him. Once we understand that, then we need to act on it and focus our lives on diligently seeking him and in getting baptized to show that we choose to follow God's commandments. Thank you for your attention.